Hey there, I'm Scott. This is Tangents. Well, today I'm going to talk about shade. And I'm intentionally not trying to be too clever here, but intentionally using this as a double entendre. So, first, obviously, shade in the sense of throwing shade. And also, second, shade in the sense of things are not black and white. The thing that prompted me to do this was basically every week I listen to the Slate Political Gabfest, one of my favorite podcasts. I don't obviously fully agree with everything that the people on there say, but I really enjoy them. I've listened to it for years. I've been they started this thing called Slate Plus, which is this sort of voluntary membership thing to kind of pay for it. I have from the beginning very happily and very proudly gone beyond. You can pay whatever you want. So they asked for a certain amount, and I paid significantly more. Not like ridiculous over the top amount, but enough more that I feel good about it. And the reason that I've done this is because I really like John Dickerson. I like Emily Bazelon. I like David Plotz. I like listening to them. I enjoy it. There's something about the discussions that they have that just tickles me. So that prompted me to do it. I feel good about it, and so on. Yesterday, they had a guest on, and I obviously am terrible in terms of prep here because I don't have her name. I don't have the name of her book. I may add the link here, or I may just mention it and not get to it. But the book that she wrote and what she was talking about is basically all about people elevating conflict to a ridiculous level. And I don't necessarily want to, I've not read the book, just kind of listened to her summary and their summary of it. Don't necessarily want to endorse it, although it sounds pretty decent. But what I did want to talk about is this kind of general problem. And I think it's a societal problem that it definitely is deeply enmeshed in politics. I mean, you look at our current situation, and you see all of these cases where people are essentially political theater characters. They're not actually in government to try to govern. They're not trying to pass laws. They're not trying to do good regulation. It's all a matter of like performative bullshit going on Fox News. It's not just, I'm going to pick more on the Republicans than the Democrats, but the Democrats also, like they're going on MSNBC or Rachel Maddow and this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of stuff where it's not so much trying to move the ball forward. And again, like I do want to say, no false equivalence there. Republicans, much worse than Democrats. Both bad. There is definitely a massive asymmetry there. But you still have this thing where people get on there, they do stuff that is just us versus them. It's this stupid. I mean, I talk a lot about the duopoly and the political situation where we have two parties. Realistically, wherever you stand politically, almost certainly not going to be fully aligned with either of those two. Probably not even significantly aligned with them. Like you may be more than half with one and less than half with the other. But in reality, I mean, you're taking this high dimensional space of all of your preferences, all of your leanings. And even if we cluster a lot as people, like, I tend to align with certain people who are very much for universal health care, good public safety net, and things like this, good social safety net. Those kinds of things we're clumping together. But in that clump, there are lots of people who agree or disagree with various, other things that are either related or unrelated, how to go about it and all of this. When you really get down to it, the clusters that we fall into, probably, like 2 is way inadequate. Half dozen, maybe kind of sufficient in general, but In reality, it's bigger than that even. And it's a problem because we're given a choice between two options. And those two options end up coming down to like, okay, on one hand, I've got Kyrsten McSinema, who I could vote for, who is terrible. You know, I'm not going to even go into why she's so terrible, but she is purely cynical and just a terrible actor. She's standing in the way of things. And like Manchin, she enjoys her position of being, you know, a big fucking thorn in the side of progress because, and she enjoys, I'm sure, getting people like me riled up about her. Not because she wants to govern or do anything there, she has any kind of political views or philosophy or, you know, principles or anything like that, but simply because she likes, you know, she's a political creature and she wants to get reelected. She has a career that she likes. She likes getting money from donors and all this kind of stuff. She likes power. And so she's just doing things to increase all of those things. She likes attention. She is a archetype of negative attention is still attention, which is another thing that is a massive problem with how we've structured things. And it's not just a matter of politics. Like we have voting systems like first past the post, plurality voting, winner takes all, that basically give us this, you know, binary option. And in doing so, that means that people take all of their diversity and they end up coming down to like one or two issues that they really care about, that they kind of align with people on. Or maybe not even that much. Maybe it's just a tribal thing. And we end up just, you know, you're on the red team, I'm on the blue team, and I'm just going to go blue team no matter what. You're going to go red team no matter what. Even if you start questioning, you know, where you stand and you find out, oh, you're actually a left libertarian, even though you think of yourself as a libertarian, and then you kind of tease further and you're like, well, you're actually like more aligned with me than you are with the party that you keep voting for. But never mind that now. And it's, again, there's this constant tension that I have between framing this as a false dichotomy, like, you know, or a false equivalence rather, where you have the two parties and you're kind of saying they're the same thing. They're not the same thing, but they are both part of the same syndrome. You know, they're both a malignancy on our ability to actually move forward. One thing that's interesting that I just read, and I think this is telling. We're not that old of a country. Couple years and going on 50 in the not too distant future. But we are one of the few countries, possibly the only one, that is operating under a democratic republic structure, something like us, that has a constitution that was written in the 18th century. So everybody else, I mean, you look at France, they've had so many different iterations on their constitution. And I'm not saying France is perfect by any means, but other countries iterate on this stuff. Other ones have informed their structures based on experience. We have the ability to update our constitution. I mean, we do have amendments and a process for that. But the process for it is ridiculous to such an extent that it's very hard. You know, I mean, if you look at the time when prohibition was passed and then overturned, it was hard already, but it wasn't anything like what it is today. Today we have a population where like a third of people, and I'm giving like, obviously these are not actually like exact thirds, but one group of people are going to vote blue pretty much no matter what. One group of people are going to vote red pretty much no matter what. And their geographic distribution is such that some places, they're never going to go, you know, the statistical probability of certain places going the other way is extremely, extremely low. There are places like Arizona, where I happen to live, that things can kind of, you know, they're in flux. But when you look at districts, even here, there are districts like CD4, CD5, the current ones. Those are Paul Gosar and Andy Biggs's district. Biggs is the one that I happen to live in. And the idea that Biggs's district would go blue ever, certainly in the near future, is unlikely, to say the best. Now, it's not necessarily that the people in the district have a huge skew. It's just that there's enough of a skew here that it's very unlikely to happen. CD4, Gosar is a horrible person. Biggs is a horrible person. Even by the standards of Kyrsten Sinema, these are horrible people, which is saying something. And again, also, they're people that, they're not in government. This is the thing that drives me insane. They didn't run for office to run things. They didn't run for office because they wanted to fix things or to make things better, even to pass legislation that I would think was problematic. They do, to some extent, do that. But their real motivation fundamentally seems to be just essentially to collect money and to run, to exercise that political side without actually doing much in terms of governing. So we're paying them nearly $200K per year in taxpayer money. We're paying these people this. They have ridiculously nice benefits, government insurance that most people would kill for if they needed it. They have retirement plans. They have all kinds of stuff. And the best part is also they have a quarter of the year of paid vacation, essentially. So this is even by the standards of countries that have much more vacation than us, they have a really nice situation. And yet they're there to take advantage of that and to use their position to further their own power and, for personal gain. It's completely contrary to the ideals of what a democracy is supposed to be. And again, part of this is due to this, the structural things that basically give us two choices. You get two bad choices: McCinema or McSally. It's like Jesus fuck or fuck. I mean, I don't even, I'm not sure, and McSally is horrible, I just want to be clear. I'm not sure that it's necessarily all that clear which one is worse. The main reason that I voted for McCinema is that at least nominally the Senate is blue, but like I'm saying, it's not like I can count on the Democrats to do 95% of the stuff that I would like them to do. They're better than the Republicans, I would say. I think that's a fairly safe, I can't say it's uncontroversial. There are people who would be, there are people who would argue with me. I know them, I follow a lot of them on Twitter. I like a lot of them, but the two are not equivalent. They're definitely, they're both sides of the same coin. They're both bad, but there is an asymmetry there. So anyway, I'm rambling on about that. What I'm trying to get to today is this lack of shade. And I think, this is something that I encounter on Twitter all the time. It's basically, social media is kind of designed for this. And in fact, even to the extent that the system itself wouldn't be, the algorithms that underlie it, people want to build a system that, you have so many tweets you can't possibly see them. You have so many Facebook posts, you'll have trouble seeing them. You have so many of whatever, so we got to filter them out, right? And you can kind of work through the process. They're like, okay, well, we want to filter them out. Let's amplify some of them algorithmically, or suppress other ones algorithmically. And then how do you know which ones to do? Well, okay, we're going to take the ones that get the most interaction and we're going to boost them. And, so what you end up doing is a couple steps of this. And now the next thing you know, you have something where not necessarily good or productive stuff, but the stuff that gets the most nods, the stuff that gets people to yell at you, Whether it's negative or positive attention, the algorithm does not give a fuck. So we've built a system which benefits from all of this interaction, that benefits from, getting people riled up, getting people superheated, from not moderating things. The moderating force is actively suppressed in all of these things. So for example, I'm putting this on YouTube. I'm not sitting here telling you, like and subscribe and watch the whole thing all the way through. I'm not saying, boost any of this stuff or amplify it. And so the algorithm sees that and it's like, well, probably not going to show this to anybody, to be honest. It's intentionally not designed to be something that's marketable or that you could probably put ads in. I'm going to say fuck. That immediately wipes out a bunch of ad potential. There are a lot of things that I'll say that probably advertisers wouldn't want to be associated with. And so, what are you gonna do? And again, I will say, my intention with this, and I've said that many times, but is not to grow and make this like a massive community. It's basically just kind of a hobby. It's kind of a thing that I have a few people who watch or listen that I know and like. For the dog ears popping up, like Brian and Gil, and I have a few others who are less vocal, who are kind of like in the mix. I don't talk about them as much, but they're there. And there's a kind of kernel of that. I kind of make it for them. I kind of make it for you. I kind of make it for myself. And beyond that, I don't think it's a healthy or a good thing for people to try to strive for celebrity. Honestly, there's something very fucked up about our society that this is considered somehow a massive good. Like, it's not good to have an accomplishment that ends up thrusting you into some kind of, like elevated position. It's good just to have the elevated position, just to have the followers or whatever unto themselves. It's a really warped system that we've created. And I mean, part of this is based on advertising, because advertising is the same thing. They don't give a fuck about anything but eyeballs. If you're paying attention to something, then that's a place you could stick an ad, right? And your attention is very precious. I talk about how much, like, there's nothing more precious than our time. And I greatly appreciate you listening or watching this because of that. There's nothing more precious or valuable than our time. There's nothing that is less replaceable. And it's one of the things that really, makes all of these systems like Facebook, like YouTube, Twitter, it makes them really horrible, because they're designed to basically hijack, literally hijack the reward mechanism of our brains, get us going there, getting us refreshing, to steal our attention, to steal our time. And ultimately they're doing it because they want to sell ads. I mean, it's kind of fucked up. And then it's not even that this is an even more fucked up layer of it. It's not even that they want to sell the products. It's not like, at least you could say, okay, we want to sell ads because we're really trying to help people sell their stuff. That would be, I don't like it anyway. I don't like ads, but at least that's something. What they're really doing is more like, we want to convince people that selling their ads on our shit is going to help them. Whether or not we actually do that is completely immaterial. It's just a matter of selling people the idea that we do, which means, getting a lot of attention, being able to pump up your metrics, which is, again, why Twitter is so full of these bot accounts that you would have, like, you and I could go on Twitter right now and find some account that's like John1732214, blah, blah, blah. They have 12 followers and a blue background, some kind of a picture like this. The picture is either this person doesn't exist, a generative neural network image, or it's just a stock photo or whatever. And then you go through the people who are following them, and they're all the same kind of account. And we could go through and find, if we took an hour, literally could find hundreds of these accounts without trying. And we're not Twitter. If Twitter cared to do this, it would take them very little effort to algorithmically detect and remove a lot of them. But they don't have an incentive to do so. In fact, their incentive is quite to the contrary. Their incentive is to keep those accounts because they can say, hey, advertisers, come here, we have this many active users. And they don't really give a shit that those active users are fake or are the same, pimply faced asshole who has 200 accounts that he can use to harass people or to just say random shit or whatever. They don't care about that. They just care about the numbers. And again, to me, this seems like a massive class action suit by the very advertisers that I can't stand as well against Twitter, because the advertisers should be going, like, hey, you guys are completely scamming us. You're selling us this idea that people are seeing this, but really 95% of this is not actual people. It's bullshit. And, so advertisers are getting fucked, the users are getting fucked, and the society is getting fucked because we have all of these systems like this that are designed to create rage, to remove shade. If I'm sitting here talking about, well, okay, there's this situation and there's some complexity to it. There's, there are arguments. I'm very much for Medicare for all. Yeah. There are arguments against it. And if we were really having a frank and honest discussion, you can go through some of these things. I still think universal health, well, first off, universal healthcare is essential. It's something that every other developed nation has managed. But the way to get there are arguments for various things. I don't think a for-profit system is fundamentally going to make it, but you can go through and have this discussion and think about it, but you're going to be talking back and forth about a lot of stuff. You start like delving into the statistics, and then the annoying thing is like, and this is one that I talk about, but it's not something that people are that interested in. If you actually go into the reasons that our costs are so high, and you want to say, like, why is it that we spend a fifth of our GDP on healthcare and we have worse life expectancies, worse outcomes for everything? And our life expectancy is falling. We have higher infant mortality, higher maternal mortality, all these things that I say all the fucking time. Why is that? And then you start going, well, you go into it, you could point and it's the insurance companies. And actually, yeah, it is the insurance companies, but it's more than that. It's the insurance companies, it's the pharmaceutical companies, it's for-profit hospitals. Doctors have some factor in there, although the doctors and nurses and LPs and all LPNs and all this stuff, they're also kind of getting screwed over. There are all of these things, all of these factors. You start like teasing it apart and it's a massive mess. It's not like there's a simple fix. And which I wish there was, but then you kind of, like you want to actually unravel this stuff. The stuff that it would take to get there is boring. It's not rage inducing necessarily. And a lot of it, even like, as much as I might bitch about a pharmaceutical company, first off, the person who's running that company, now they're doing stuff that I consider unethical, but they're kind of playing the game by the rules as they are. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's acceptable. I'm not saying it's something that I would do. But given the rules of the game that they are stuck in, as we are, they're kind of doing the thing to maximize profit, which is actually like their legal obligation and their job to do this, maximize shareholder value. They could, to such an extent that they could be sued for not doing it, which is a fucked up thing in our society. So you can you start going into this and you're like, oh, well, this person is not as much, I'm not saying they're not a villain, but they're not like the completely black and white villain that you might make them out to be. And the problem with that, of course, is, I can sit here and say like how much GlaxoSmithKline sucks. There are a ton of people who work for them or Pfizer or whoever who are perfectly fine people. They're, and they're also like, they have a lot of school debt. They need to pay for it. They have wants and needs that are material, and they want to pay for it. They want to be able to go on vacation. They want to be able to have a nice house. They want to be able to have a family. And all of these things drive them to make decisions which ultimately end up being bad often. But you can understand where it's coming from. And you can't, not only that, you can't necessarily even blame them, because the cost of just sitting there and like screaming at the wind and saying, fuck this, I'm not going to participate. Well, good luck, you're out in the wilderness and you're screwed. I mean, it's not a thing that most people are in a position to do. And so this is a thing that, it's unfortunate, because to really get into addressing all of these things, to really make progress here, you need this ability to talk back and forth and kind of moderate things, not constantly like fight and escalate, because that's not gonna, it doesn't accomplish anything. All it does is, like, you're saying how much of an asshole somebody is, and then they just dig their heels in and punch back, and then it goes back and forth. Things get worse, things get more heated, no product or no movement gets made, things get, just stagnant and go down this horrible spiral. And that's kind of where we are. I hope to some extent people are going to kind of get over that and kind of move past it. But it's a shitty situation. And it's also like, a lot of people are disenchanted with politics because politics sucks, but it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because in addition to the fact that, we do only have really two choices practically, and there are a bunch of laws in place, and there are a bunch of systematic things, like the signature requirements for ballot access, that basically make you an idiot for running as an independent. If you want to run third party, it's not impossible. You can do it. Bernie has done it. But it's really fucking hard. And even for someone like Bernie, who's had a career establishing himself, as president, as a presidential candidate, he had to run as a Democrat, basically. He could have, don't get me wrong, he had a choice. He could have run as an independent or a green or whatever. But getting on the ballot everywhere in the country, almost impossible, even for someone with his scale. Getting in a position where, and especially like this last election, you have Trump and you have fuckface Biden, Trump again worse, Biden's still a shithead. And then you have Bernie, and you imagine, well, okay, Bernie's an option, Biden's an option, or Trump. And if you can't vote, if you don't have like an approval voting system or a ranked choice system where you can vote for both Biden and Bernie, or say like Bernie's my first choice, Biden's my second choice, no to the Trump. Or I'll take either one, even though Bernie is my first choice. Biden's better, 10 other people are better, or Trump. Fuck Trump. If you don't have that kind of system in place, you basically have to make a strategic calculation, and you can't blame somebody. Well, you can, but it's not really fair or reasonable to say, like, well, fuck you, you voted for Biden. And don't get me wrong, I hate the fact that I voted for Biden. I hate the fact that I voted for McSinema, but the system as it is structured currently, and until we fix it, basically means that if you look at the system as it is, you don't really have a lot of choice. Like, you can certainly say, okay, well, fuck you, I'm going to vote for somebody else. But, what are you going to accomplish? Now, in principle, you could say, well, if everybody did it, then things would change. And that's true, but it's a prisoner's dilemma kind of situation, because everybody's not going to do it. And you're hoping that all of these people are going to look at that situation where they've got the option they prefer, the option that sucks but is not the option that they really want to avoid, and they have to kind of say, like, in my mind, the shitty one that's better than the terrible one is essentially what I'm going to be stuck with, because I don't even have this option realistically. It doesn't help also with these that, and it's kind of a circular thing, like the Green Party is not really viable on any serious scale. And so, and I'm picking them, but some other party you could just as easily sub in. They're not viable most places on any realistic scale. And so you start looking at the candidates that they put up, and they're not serious people for the most part. I like some of them. The Green Party VP candidate, I'm actually mutual with on Twitter. I like her. The presidential candidate that they had, I even if he was on the ballot in Arizona, and even if it wasn't like, a situation where I kind of felt like I had a gun to my head that said, you have to vote for Biden because the alternative is Trump. Imagine that I could have done that. This guy misgendered Manning, a few times, has a lot of things that you kind of dig into him and you're like, yeah. And then also, again, not a very serious guy as far as I'm concerned, which partly stems from the fact that, it's not a serious candidate because it's not a serious party because it can't win. And again, okay, in principle, theoretically, it could win, but in principle, theoretically, all the air in this room could just suddenly condense itself into the corner. It's possible, but exceedingly unlikely. And then when you look at, fucking Jill Stein, I've talked about this before, but I don't want to get. It's amazing to me how much I can't get off this fucking political shit. As much as I desperately, you have no idea how desperately I would like to, and yet it sucks me in so much. And it's actually part of what I'm talking about here, because the system is set up to build animosity, to build rage, to build frustration. And in some sense, that's, a more attractive option, not in a practical sense, but in a sort of natural human emotional sense. That's more practical and more attractive than the stuff that actually is going to affect change. You feel better about it. And it also, I think it's kind of it's another one of these vicious circles. Like, you get sucked into that, and then you go down that path, and then you realize, oh shit, this didn't work. And then you kind of, at a certain point, maybe you do it a few times, and then you just throw your hands up and you're like, well, fuck this, it's not possible. And of course, that's not true. It is possible. Things have been much worse than they are now. There were kings and emperors and, tyrants, and people overcame them. Things now suck, in many ways considerably, in many ways needlessly, but they're not as bad as these kinds of situations. And when you look at it and you think about it, it's like, well, we could probably actually overcome this shit. But again, big pile of shit. So the shade thing, I was also going to talk about people throwing shade. I'm not going to bother with that part. I definitely don't want to contribute to it. Right now, one of the reasons that I'm recording this now is part of it is I have a little break. When I say a little break, I'm working. I have shit ton of stuff to do, way more than I have time for. But I also have a little break in my meetings, and have that. I'm kind of riled up because there's this email thing going back and forth that's just hyper dramatic and totally counterproductive, and it's more of the same situation where it's like, I don't want to get into the details of who's talking or what they're saying or any of this kind of stuff. I've generally tried to kind of stay out of it, although it's a thread with like a half dozen people in it. And it's just this back and forth escalation, throwing blame, all this kind of stuff. And I look at this and it's like, the person who's kind of at the center of this is trying to accomplish something, ostensibly, not happy with the current situation, but rather than fixing the problem and not the blame, it's just like a shitstorm. They're creating this shitstorm, yelling at people and doing all this kind of stuff, yelling at people who are trying to help, frankly. and making things worse needlessly. And you just look at it and you're like, this is just so dumb. Like, just, I get it. You're not that happy. The situation's uncomfortable. It sucks. But it is what it is. It's not a situation where anyone did anything intentionally bad. It's just kind of like things don't work sometimes. And then also, I mean, if you want to start pointing fingers, you can go, well, okay, this was going to happen, but then somebody kind of intervened and added on this extra chunk of work or extra chunk of stuff and hired a new person to like make things worse. I mean, that wasn't the goal to make things worse, but it ended up, delaying things and all of this. And you start like going back and you're like, well, you can kind of see how it got into the situation that it did, but there's no point in going back and dissecting it right now. Take the situation as it is, see where you are, figure out where you're trying to go, figure out the path there, work together, get it done. And then after that, maybe go through and do like a post-mortem and see like, okay, next time if we get in this situation, maybe this is a better thing to do. But when you're in the thick of it, that's not really helping. And it's also like, if you're gonna do that, you have to do it in a very dispassionate way versus like trying to throw blame at people. And I mean, this situation, I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's like a situation where you have somebody who was previously like blaming somebody else and yelling at them, and then this other person's like blaming. It's just like a circle of blame, and you can see again it goes into the shade thing, it goes into the like de-escalation thing. Rather than just saying, okay, chill the fuck out, fix the problem, not the blame. All this stuff keeps escalating. You keep having people pointing fingers, and all of that is totally counterproductive, and it's not helping anything. It's just making it a worse situation. And you're like, just why? Does not need to be this way. I'm trying to not share, like, maybe at some point in the future I'll go through like what's actually happening here, but it's just so fucking just dumb is mainly what I would say. And it's a situation that like it's not ideal, but it doesn't need to be worse. It's gonna be worse because of what's going on here. And it's also a situation where you have, let's just say most people have abandoned somebody here, and the people who have stuck with them, the people who abandoned this person did so because they're getting like, you can kind of see where it came from. Let's just say that. And then once those people have kind of jettisoned off, now it's like, oh, I don't have those people to point my finger at anymore. I'm going to start pointing it at the ones that are remaining to try to help. And it's just like, why does this seem like a good idea to you? Anyway, I feel like I've probably already said more than I should about that, but it's been like, we have all these other projects going on, and I just have to say, like, this thing going back and forth not only is not helping that project, it's distracting a bunch of people, including myself. It's kind of riling people up, and so it's interfering with other work. So in addition to not getting the things done that need to be done there, it's making other things, it's having negative impact across the board. And it's just frustrating, and it's tiring, and it's like, like, I don't know. I don't want to, I'm really restraining myself from going into more details because I don't want to say anything that is overly revealing there, but it's just a dumb situation. I'm tired of it, and I don't know. I'm very much looking forward to it being over. So on the plus side, though, I did end up talking here instead of actually doing some of the other stuff that I'd like to do, which I still have to do, of course. I'll just be like working later tonight and over the weekend. on it, and that is what it is. This was decompressing for me, so I hope it wasn't too bad for you. I hope I didn't leave so much out of that it just sounded like a crazy diatribe, but I promise you, at some point down the road, I will go into the details of it. And then, there's plenty there to talk about, and it's just probably stuff to learn from. Let's just say that. But going back to the shade thing, this thing where people are good or bad. The last thing I want to say, and I'm going to stay on politics again, because as annoying as politics is, it's better than this other situation. AOC. So I'm a pretty big fan of AOC. Don't think she's perfect. I think, she's one of the more successful people kind of on the left. She's gotten to Congress and got reelected. I've tried to get into Congress. I know what's involved in that, and I have great respect and admiration for anyone who can accomplish it, including, I wouldn't say admiration, but I respect people like Biggs and Gosar and Matt Gaetz and these total shit asses, in the sense that they have managed to accomplish that. Doesn't mean that I respect them as people or like or respect any of the stuff that they're doing, but I appreciate how hard it is, and I see that they did it, and you have to give them a little bit of kudos for that. Doesn't make, and again with the shade, like Sinema, I can give you a million things that I can't stand about this person, but one thing that you can say about McCinema, she had one strategy, didn't work that well, and kind of looked at the situation and then said, I can try this. And that worked really well for her. And I wouldn't take it myself, but I can understand why she would do it. And I'm not even sure that you could necessarily blame her for it. And you could even say, like, maybe someplace, I don't believe this is true, by the way, but you could say, maybe someplace she's just playing the game so that she'll be in a position to do the things that matter when they come up. I don't think that's true, because I've seen the stuff that she's done, and but you could argue that. You could certainly make a case for doing that. I again don't think it's true, but man. Anyway, with that, I think I do need to get back to work. Hopefully this was decent. Tomorrow I'm going flying again to Payson, and I'm going with my partner because last week we went to Sedona, and the morning was beautiful and smooth, and the flight was awesome, and then the way back was a little bumpy. Let's just say that. It heats up, the Alec Baldwin in the plane, talking about turbulence in the Hunt for Red October. The way back was a little bumpy. Tomorrow is going to be a little cooler, and it's going to get hot again. And I think probably we're not going to go flying that often for a little while until it cools down, just to avoid that stuff. But I wanted to get another flight in soon, and this will hopefully be cool. I think it might be a little bumpy too, but it should be very nice views, and it'll be fun, I think, overall. We'll see how it goes, but it's crazy. The fact that I'm a pilot, it's important as a pilot to mention that you're a pilot. It's like, I'm a doctor, I'm a pilot. You have to kind of throw those things out there. It's in the contract, don't worry about it. But it blows my mind every once in a while that I am, and that I can do that. Looking forward to that. That is my day tomorrow. A week from Sunday, I'm getting my second shot of Pfizer. And again, like Pfizer, I hate the fact that they're taking publicly funded research and making massive profits from it. I hate the fact that they're making taxpayer money from giving these things out. It's fine to cover the expenses, but it's way beyond that. They're making massive, massive profits off of it. But I do appreciate that that exists. I love the fact that I'm half vaccinated now, although, you know, hopefully we don't fuck things up and end up having a strain that can evade the immune response from that, but we'll see. Getting that, and a couple weeks from there, back to lunch. So I'm looking forward to that as well. With that, thanks for listening to my ramblings. I will be back soon, and 再见.